add to next to America something I.
Next to, of course, got America I.
Okay, I can go first.
Oh.
Okay. I have to look this over.
Well, I wrote this one, so I can.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. So, in the poem, he uses the quote because there's quotations in the first stanza. So it's a quote, and we think it's from a young man. And E.E. Cummings uses the quote to satirize war and like how the boy is portraying it because he has the wrong idea of it, and you'll see that throughout the poem. So it's about the misconceptions of war, and he does this by making a satirical tone and moves towards the subject. And because the boy throughout the poem, you'll notice that there's no like punctuation, and some things don't make sense. So he's uneducated. So that further shows like the satire towards him and his ideas of America, and how it's like showing through everyone else.
Okay, so you kind of already said this.
Yeah.
Okay, but when the speaker talks, he talks in like a really hyped up tone, and he's talking about war, but when he talks about it, he makes it sound as if it's a fairy tale, and it's like this knight in shining armor, and it's very romantic. And so he is stuttering through his words, but when he's talking, he's just like, oh, and they're going out there, but they're fighting for their lives, and they're there to be really good soldiers and all this stuff. And it's like he talks about it in a tone that makes war, sugarcoats war, when it's not a good thing, and it's not, like, the end results of it usually end in destruction of a lot of people and a lot of different countries and mental destruction and everything like that. So it's just like saying that he's uneducated and doesn't realize what is actually going on. He's too caught up in the glories of war and the pride of war, rather than the effects of war.
Jessica wrote this line. Okay, so he shows the satirical tone through diction. So when he begins off the poem, we don't have it up right now, but in the middle of it, he starts singing the national anthem and then goes into My Country 'Tis of Thee, and that further shows like his knowledge on America and how it doesn't go past the glory of war because he can't even remember the national anthem, and which also supports the fact that he can't like come up with a complete thought. And later in the poem, he's so hyped up, he starts saying, by glory, by jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum, which also shows that he can't finish his thoughts process or come up with a complete sentence, and he's just so hyped up, like hypo-America. He says, what is more beautiful than these heroic happy dead? And I looked at it as an inappropriate word to use. I don't think it's very appropriate to say, look at these beautiful men that died, because I mean it's really good, well not good, but I mean you get a lot of honor from going to war for your country and fighting, but it's not looked at as a beautiful positive thing. You want to mourn, it's a sad effect of war. So I think that shows again how he doesn't have a lot of knowledge about what it's really like. He hasn't experienced it for himself.
Okay, so like one major shift that we saw in the poem. Well, at first I thought that it was in the middle of the poem, but then I realized that I like the way that you take the poem. At first, it depends on how you read it, because when I first read it, it made it sound like he was saying, oh, I love my country, but look at what they're doing to these people. And then you had to look at like keywords like happy and by golly, by gee, and like you realize that it was actually talking about like the sad, like how he doesn't understand war at all. And so one of the shifts of the poem was, then should the voice of liberty be mute? And he's asking like why is there nobody that is like willing to say, oh, it's for my liberty, it's for my freedom, and why aren't they happy about it? And then it shifts from the person speaking to the narrator, and then it goes into E.E. Cummings talking about him, and he said that he spoke and drank rapidly a glass of water. And it's talking about how E.E. Cummings is trying to make the reader contemplate why are we having this war if you can't even, if you know it's not for your own freedom and your own liberty? If the war wasn't, when World War I started, it wasn't for America. America got brought into it the same way as World War II. And it wasn't, they knew that they weren't fighting for themselves, they were fighting for other people. So it's trying to make, the shift right here is trying to, E. Cummings is trying to create readers to, I'm not going to say create, is trying to make readers understand that this war should not be happening because it's not for our own liberty and our own freedom. It's not a good thing, and that although you couldn't see that with the person talking, once that he stops, he creates that.
Okay, so here's connotation, and we talked about this already. It goes from how he starts singing the national anthem, and then he doesn't remember the rest of the song, so he begins, "In My Country 'Tis of Thee," and then I said, Cummings did this purposely to satirize the man's knowledge on America. And even though he thinks he's a diehard American and is like all for it, he doesn't know his song lyrics, and that shows the irony of the situation.
Okay, then, so then the next connotation is, what could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead who rushed the lions to the roaring slaughter? And then, so first of all, the reason why it's always like mumble jumbled for this is that he's so rushed up in his words because he's so excited about this happening that it's like, that's why E. Cummings put the beautiful into the next phrase, because it's like saying that he's so rushed up and so caught up in his pride and so caught up in being hardcore American that he doesn't understand it. And if you and Brianna had talked about this earlier, where if you think about heroic dead when you're talking about war, when you put in the happy, it's not a happy situation, it's a sad and mourning situation. But the fact that he put in the speaker says heroic happy dead, it illustrates that he has nothing, he doesn't understand what's going on, and he thinks that it's just about your pride, but he doesn't see the bad effects of it, he only sees the good effects.
And we talked about like all of these, but it says, "Thy sons acclaim your glorious name by glory, by jingle, by gee, by gosh, by gum." So in the first part, he's saying the soldiers gain their glorious name by fighting and by killing people, and that's not appropriate. I don't know, I just don't feel like this poem is very appropriate at all when you look at the grand scheme of things, like the satire, because the boy doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's really sad. So and just like the by jingle, by gee, by gosh, by gum, it's showing how he can't come up with words, he's just so excited and he doesn't understand the situation.